So what do you guys do? I mean, you're not ignorant of the fact that you should be healthy. You're in a profession that's very demanding. I often said you guys reaffirm my faith in humanity because of the way that it's very selfless, I think, your profession. You're certainly not doing it for the large amounts of money.
True.
So you're very selfless in that you're giving yourselves to educate the children and to affect society in a positive way. And if we didn't have this kind of educational pursuits, then our society, and it's the basis for a healthy society, is to have healthy minds, right? Mm-hmm. So what do you do, or how do you approach? It's prodigious. What do you do for yourselves? Do you have any strategies?
So go ahead. I'll let you speak.
Okay, so for me, my thing is water. If I eat unhealthy all day, I have this mentality where I feel like water will cleanse everything. Water will cleanse all. And it's really hard for teachers to be able to even grab a drink, because we're so busy, we're running around. But if you could just have that bottle with you and carry it with you at all times, and it's convenient, that's just my trick.
Well, dehydration is a really big problem for educators, and it's something that I've spoken about before. I've even written about it a little bit in terms of trying to change. You can't leave the classrooms, and so you can't leave the kids unattended. And there's actually studies that say that teachers are suffering from problems with the bladder and things like that, infections, at a higher rate than the normal population, because essentially you can't go to the bathroom when you want to.
Right.
So I think that hydration is huge because it affects so many of the body systems, including actually your mental acuity. When you're dehydrated, you can't really focus. Your energy level is low, and a lot of people may reach for the caffeine or for the sugar, and that further dehydrates you and puts you in this cycle where you're going down even more. So if you can figure out ways to stay hydrated during the day, that is a huge thing. But I would also say is to strategize and try to cut out eating things that you shouldn't, because every time that you do that, really, it pulls on your system and makes your day much more arduous. And it's hard to catch up when eating improperly one day and saying, well, I'm going to catch up, because you don't get much sleep. You don't get much rest, and so you kind of have to be even more strict with yourself than the average person, because they may be able to crash a little bit, or they have less time at work.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot.
Yeah, so to answer your question, one thing that I do is similar to what Nancy mentioned earlier, that mentality that the family has. We eat our food with a lot of salt, we cook with a lot of sugar, we don't watch the amount of butter that we put on certain things. So I watch my parents. So obviously, since I'm a product of them, I am looking at the health problems that they have is what I'm going towards, and I want to avoid that. So recently, my dad had a stroke. So everything that the doctor told him, I'm practicing it as well. So he was the type of person where he would eat a lot of salt, a lot of pepper, a lot of sugar, a lot of everything, just because nothing ever happened to him in the past.
I see.
So at 76 years old, everything happened at once. He had a stroke, he was diagnosed with diabetes, cholesterol, heart problems, everything in one day we found out that he had. So when the nutritionist came and was speaking to him about, okay, if you want to live, these are the things you need to do. So my sister and I stood there and we said, it's going to be a family change. So we all live in the same house. If he has to eat brown rice, we're going to eat brown rice. If he has to stop drinking coffee and now substitute it with herbal tea, we're all going to do it. So now I'm more mindful when I grocery shop that I'm looking at the nutrition facts. Before, I would never pay attention to it. So now it's like 3 grams of sugar as opposed to 20 grams of sugar.
Sure.
I did not know this in a loaf of bread.
Sure.
2 bags of bread are right next to each other. They look exactly alike. But if you turn it over, you will see a big difference. So like with diabetes, I was never exposed to diabetes up until November.
I see.
So now everyone, like people who say they have diabetes or know more about it, I'm constantly asking questions just because if I'm a carbon copy of my parents, that I'm going to get it. I'm just trying to avoid it.
Potentially.
Right. So just to answer your question, that's what I'm doing. I'm just being more mindful of how I'm eating.
Right.
life changes.
Right, making life change.
I think that's awesome. What about you?
So I'm probably the most guilty up here of like not taking care of yourself. So I can talk more so about the things that I would ideally that I would be doing. So these are things that I strive for
Okay.
more than the things that I'm actually doing.
Fair enough.
I mean, one thing that I did begin with, and this is more so about kind of like your mental like staying positive and just kind of being more aware of the things that you're feeding yourself mentally, I guess, and
Okay.
than physical. But I
What do you mean feeding yourself mentally?
so like what types of things are you keeping on your mind throughout the day? So like I began, I really like doing like affirmations or stating a positive statement at the beginning of your day and trying
Alright.
to repeat that as much as possible, kind of letting that be kind of like your mantra for the day and
Sure.
and trying to like act on those positive statements. And so that's
Sure.
something that I started doing for myself personally, and then I kind of brought it out to the other members of the teaching staff here. That's one thing that I am doing, but I want to see that same type of positive movement happen for me physically as well. And there are things that, again, if we're here 14 hours a day, when are you going to really have time or the energy to go and, go out and kind of do.
You have to build it into your life.
Sure.
What I tell people when I teach, if your exercise training or your education doesn't leave the classroom, then it's worthless. In other words, if you just go to the gym or take a class at a studio and that education doesn't permeate your life, then it's irrelevant, in my opinion. Because the true value of it is to really inculcate it into your everyday. How you move, how you lift things, how you lower things, the decisions you make, all of these things should be built in. And since it generally took us many years to create bad habits, I think that people should take the pressure off of themselves of trying to alleviate it all at once, because it's really not going to happen for most people unless you are really, really of a mindset, or it happens to some people when they're diagnosed with a particular ailment and right away they're like, okay, I'm going to cut out X, Y, Z, and they're able to stick to it. But for the majority of people, it isn't that way. The majority of people have to start, and it's a progression. And so I would suggest to you that you start to, things like not taking an elevator, things like walking more, those make a big difference, a huge difference in the outcome, because we have, my wife and I have this app, Moves, on our phones, and it basically tells you how much you walk a day. And so just being cognizant of how much you walk a day, and there are tons of other things now that you can wear on you to let you know even how much you're sleeping or not sleeping or what have you. I think just having that awareness of, well, this day I didn't really move at all, versus, oh wow, I did a lot today, and what did I do today that was different from the day that I didn't move, and building that stuff in. Even the things that you may do on your downtime, where you might be able to select something where you build in some more activities that are healthy, as opposed to just crashing with the Fritos on the couch. Not saying that you crash with Fritos on the couch.
Maybe on those stuff days. But what you say though, relating it back to kind of the teaching practice, being that I'm here for so long, in order to keep myself healthy, I have to kind of insert it into our daily schedule.
Sure.
So I need to do those things in class.
Most
Especially
people
that's
do
needed
that.
also.
Most people do have to put it in their life. Most people do. And what about you,
No.
Madame Zonia? What do you do? Do you have any strategies that you?
I think that being the oldest one out of
15 years.
I can definitely speak to the sort of lifetime struggles of just wanting to be a better version of myself.
Okay.
And it's something that I'm consistently mindful of, but I think you kind of addressed it in terms of the issue of being consistent about implementing changes, right? I think we often get like these 2-week breaks, and during that time I'm always like super rejuvenated. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna cook every day and I'm gonna do all of these wonderful things, and then you kind of get caught back up in the cycle of everyday working, and those things tend to fall to the wayside, which can be, at times it can be disappointing.
Sure.
But I think that, I for myself, I tend not to lose all hope of it ever being a possibility.
No, sure.
But I think it does speak to this idea of taking baby steps and definitely being at peace and being patient with myself in terms of, you know, some of these long-term kind of health and well-being goals that I have.
Sure.
So I think that's probably the hardest part is that it can be challenging to be consistent.
I wouldn't even say baby steps, I would just say incremental, because it's incremental, and small things make big things happen over time. You know, the thing that bothers me about a lot of so-called fitness pursuits, it doesn't take into account longevity. It acts as if somebody is not going to make it out of their 20s. Most of the people who you see represented in fitness are very young. You don't see older people. Whenever I looked for teachers in my career, mentors and people, I always looked for people who were much older than me. You know, when I started training with Kathy Grant, she was 79. I started training with Professor Ronald Duncan. He was in his going on 70 years old. And these people are very proficient. You know, Master Alan Lee, you know, in his 80s. All these people who you if they're doing it, it's a really good model for me. And as you were looking at your parents to see, you know, what you could change based on the possibilities of the negativity and the pathology, I look to them to see, well, if they're still kicking and moving at this age. And I also do look to see their limitations as well, because sometimes, especially from the movies, we get this idea of like the Kung Fu master who's 100 years old, who can levitate and fly through walls. But, you know, to see the reality of the Kung Fu master who's 85 and what he or she can and cannot do is a good thing. Because then you'll realize, it's like, well, maybe I should just slow it down a little bit here and stop trying to like lose all the cartilage in my knee, thinking that I'm going to be able to throw 500 kicks every day when I'm 85. Well, then I even have to do that, you know. So I don't know. I think, you know, you guys are great for taking the time to speak with me about it, and I'm going to put in some footage from our challenge.
Yeah. And sit and slide. You gotta turn your shoulders up. Okay, trust your butt.
With the light.
Trust your butt.
Yeah,
There you go.
There's a rock right
Drop your
there.
head back.
There's a rock right there, so you'll be fine.
Okay.
There you go. There you go.
Oh, nice.
Trust your butt.
There we go. Nice.
And then they're all still. I'm sorry.
Take a look where you're at. There's a plank right here.
Oh, can you hold that? I'm gonna go grab it and put it. It's a little spot right here. Yeah. All right, when you come down, there's a plank.